Well, hello, and it's another Stu and Ru in the shed. So over to you, Ruth.
Hi, we've got David Cranston with us. Welcome, David. And I'm awestruck because a long time ago, I know it was, you were on a TV program about your work, and my daughter Ella couldn't get over the fact that she was in church with someone who was on the telly. So we're in awe. I don't really know much about the sort of jobs that you do, so it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about your. I don't know if you're a consultant, a surgeon, or how that goes.
Well, I'm sort of retired, except the boys keep saying to me, "Dad, which retirement is this for you?" So I trained at Bristol. I came up to Oxford with Rosie in 1983 to do my PhD, Oxford DPhil, in research in kidney transplantation, thinking we were going to be here for 3 years and then move. And I applied for 8 jobs around the country, didn't get any of them, and ended up getting one that came up in Oxford. So for about 25 years was doing kidney transplantation and neurological surgery, and then just urological surgery. So consultant, and then later associate professor in the university, doing initially kidney transplantation, but then mainly specializing in kidney cancer. So as my boys say to me, "Dad, you don't seem to know much about kidneys, except you know how to take them out and put them in," which is probably about true. So I retired from the NHS officially 2 years ago, but actually for the last 6 months, I've been doing quite a lot of helping them with some of the catch-up lists because of the waiting list due to COVID. I've carried on doing my research, which we can talk about if you want, and carried on doing a bit of private practice.
Right.
So how does the balance work between the academic and the practice?
So I was appointed just as an NHS consultant, but I've always been interested in research. So when I was doing my research DPhil, and then for the next few years before I was made a consultant, I was employed by the university and doing mainly clinical stuff, but still doing research stuff. Over the last 10 years or so, I've had a part-time university appointment, but I mean, mainly it was clinical work, but we have had this big research program, and I've supervised about 18, well, joint supervised about 18 PhD or MD students who are mainly surgeons or physicians who want to do some research for a couple of years. So we've had a big research link with China for the last 20 years, which has been very interesting.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about the China connection.
Yeah, so that all started in about 2000, when a private patient of mine said, who had an ultrasound company up in the Midlands, and he was using ultrasound at high intensity for doing interesting things like purifying water and drawing gun barrels for Harrier jump jets. Basically, the best analogy is if you have a magnifying glass and focus the sun's rays on the back of your hand, you can cause a burn. We all know what ordinary ultrasound is, and you put an ultrasound into the body and then you get an image coming out. But actually at the focal point of the ultrasound, you get a very small rise in temperature. If you put the power up 10,000 times, you can cause a burn at the focal point. And this patient of mine reckoned he had machines that could do that. But at the same time, through another person, a professor of ultrasonics in Coventry, we had a link with China. He had a link with China. And so that's when our link with China developed. A place called Chongqing, which not many people have heard of, but actually used to be the old capital of China at the top of the Yangtze River. And they were producing these machines, which actually were top of the range, best in the world. We had the first one in the Western Hemisphere, and my DPhil student at the time, who's now the Vicar of Chipping Norton, James Kennedy, basically set up this research program with me and some others, and we got this machine, came over from China. We looked at treating liver and kidney cancer, and then got it CE marked so that it could be used during throughout Europe. So since then we've been doing clinical trials. We've been using it for treat fibroids in ladies, which it works pretty well for, and we've been looking at kidney cancer, pancreas cancer, and various other organs. So it is ongoing and keeps me out of mischief during my so-called retirement.
And just, this is like a long, how did you come to faith?
So my Christian family, but then, as they say, God has no grandchildren. And it was I mean, in many ways it was a slow process, but one of the key moments was when I was 12, when we were on holiday in Tenby in Wales, and we went to a Salvation Army service on a Sunday morning, and I saw a picture of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, saying, "Follow me." And I spoke to my parents afterwards, and so that was one time in my life. And then in many other ways, it's been just an ongoing and slow, but hopefully positive progress over the years.
Thank you. And as that, how has that made a difference, and in your work as well as that sort of, you know, your faith?
Yeah, well, it's always been part of my life, so difficult to say what it would have been without it. And you know, you have many caring and compassionate doctors, so I hope that it you know, I'm sure that it does sort of regulate my life in a way. Obviously there are difficult situations when you pray. Sometimes it's difficult to pray with patients. I remember the story of one patient who was waking up from an anaesthetic and saw some doctors round, sort of dressed in white, and thought that he was in heaven with the angels around him. And of course, if you go in to pray with the patients before surgery, sometimes they sort of wonder how competent you are. And actually, you have to be careful these days in how you relate your faith to your patients. But actually, just to give you an example, just last week I was with somebody who I was looking after, and he just said to me, "Are you religious?" So I said, "Well, yes, I'm a Christian. I go to church." And he obviously had been seeking for a long time, knew some of the clergy around as friends, and said that he was seeking for things. So that just gave the opportunity to talk. And I think sometimes it's a little bit like fishing. You know, you drop a, you know, fly fishing, which I enjoy from time to time, and it's, you know, sometimes you can just drop something in front of a person and see whether they pick it up or not. And if they pick it up, then I think you're at liberty to talk about it. Yeah. You know, you might see a Bible by their bedside and ask them about that, or you might they might say, "Well, what did you do yesterday?" If it was a Monday, and you say, "Well, I was in church yesterday." So there are ways in which one can just drop something in and see whether people pick it up or not.
Yeah. And that was one of the things. What are your passions? And you've just and now you're semi-retired, and obviously maybe fishing is one.
Fishing is one. Skiing, which unfortunately not been able to do this year, is another. Outdoor things. Been for the last couple of years, we've been some of the family with Adventure Plus. Some people may know Adventure Plus, run by John Cox up in Clanfield, which is basically outdoor activities for young people. But they do skiing every year. I've taken some of the family there and spoken on that once or twice, and they're doing a canoe from, well, hoping it's going to happen, canoeing from Witney to Westminster in May, which since I haven't done much this year, I might planning to do that if they if it goes ahead with a colleague. Enjoy walking. You can still do a bit of running. So outdoor stuff we enjoy.
When are you going?
Go on,
What
Ruth.
month are you going canoeing, did you say?
Well, if it happens, it's going to be May, but we just have to see whether lockdown allows us to or not.
It'll be a bit warmer then. So.
Might be a bit warmer then, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In terms of some of your other sort of Christian interests, you've been very involved in OCCMS. Tell us what that is and what you do.
Yeah, so OCCMS, it took me quite a long time to understand what OCCMS is all about. The Oxford Centre for Mission Studies based down the Woodstock Road. I was introduced to it by a friend and mentor called Monty Barker, who from Bristol, who died 5 years ago. His wife's still alive. He was chairman of the board. So it was started by Chris Sugden and Vinay Samuel in 1983, and basically it's for senior Christian leaders from around the world who are coming to do part-time PhDs. It's linked with Middlesex University because it's part-time, and certainly up till recently Oxford don't do part-time PhDs. But it's fascinating. So these are not people in their teens or 20s. These are people who are senior Christian leaders around the world, and it's quite a selection. So there was somebody called Joshua Banda, who was a bishop in Africa. I think it was Malawi, or can't quite remember where it was, but anyway, he was involved with the president of that country in just trying to negotiate a peace in a number of years ago. There's another chap who's in his 60s who was a mining engineer in Zimbabwe, worked for United Nations, I think, advising on mining, who's written his thesis on theology and mining God's way. Other people have done studies on the sex trade amongst children around the world, all sorts of different things. So it's been fascinating talking to these people, and they have a chapel service on a Wednesday morning, which is online at the moment, but when it's there, it's amazing because you have this time of prayer and you have people saying, you know, please pray for so-and-so. He couldn't get to, he's from sort of southern Sudan, he couldn't get to come over at the moment because several of his colleagues had been murdered on the way to the capital. Likewise, people from Pakistan in the Christian college there had relatives murdered, and people from South America, from Europe, from the Far East, all over the world. So it's an amazing collection of people doing this this part-time research. So they come and do it for a few months, well, for a few weeks really, and then they go back to their senior leadership job in the country that they're in. So that's the core of the program, and there are other various smaller aspects to it. There's a publishing arm of that as well.
Well, tell us, what does the chairman of the board do?
Not a lot at the moment. Well, we have so Paul Bendall Samuel's executive director, and I'm the chairman at the moment. So we have a board which meets well, twice a year in real life normally. We've got a couple of people from India, one from Malaysia, a couple from America, one from Costa Rica. So, and I mean, the thing that I've been doing has been to make some of these theses, often not written in their first language, written in English. And I've been making some of the 100,000 word theses into mini books, which has been condensing them down from 100,000 words to about 15,000 words, which has been extremely educational for me, and hopefully make the readership a little bit more easy.
Just give us an example of one you've done recently.
Yeah, one I've just done has been a fascinating one by a chap called Anu, who's just joining the board from Nagaland, and his is called Forgiveness and Politics. So I didn't know it until I read this, but there's been conflict in Nagaland for many years with sort of India and the Nagas, and also issues in Burma and so on, Myanmar. And he compared the conflict there. He looked at Northern Ireland and he compared conflict in those two places. And it was extraordinary. It was the most interesting and comprehensive and well-written introduction and explanation of the politics of the Northern Ireland conflict that I've read, written by this Indian who then, well, this Naga person who then was comparing it to the conflict there. Another one that we did was looking at the Rwandan genocide and comparing it with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've been busy, because we're going to, how's your lockdown been? But it sounds like you've been...
Yeah. Well, the first from probably March till August, didn't do anything outside. From August to now, I've been probably doing one operating session a week. But yeah, I was doing some writing and amalgamating stuff that I had written that I wanted to put into onto computer. So and trying to educate myself, reading. Never read much of, didn't know much about Charles Dickens, didn't know much about Shakespeare, so trying to educate myself.
Yeah, I like Charles. And we've been asking people, if you could choose two people to be in lockdown with, who would you choose and why?
So I would choose Joseph, the father of Jesus. I know somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody chose Mary.
That was Marley.
Marley, yeah. So I chose Joseph because I remember hearing somebody say, you know, what a remarkable man Joseph must have been to be chosen and to be known as the father of Mary's illegitimate child. And, you know, he presumably died between the when Jesus was between 12 and when he started his ministry, because we don't hear him after that. So he was obviously, you know, he was a talented carpenter, and apparently, you know, that means that he was actually quite a craftsman. But just to be able to talk to him about how he coped with, well, you know, he was looking after Mary. He took her to Bethlehem when she was pregnant. They then had to flee down to Egypt, and he was responsible for this. And also, you know, his influence on Jesus must have been pretty special as well for God to have chosen him. So that's one. The other is somebody that probably not many people, certainly outside the medical profession, will have heard of, a chap called Ambrose Paré, and he was really the father of modern surgery. He was surgeon to 4 kings of France in succession in the 1500s. And if anybody's watching this eating, this better come with a 30-second warning if you're queasy, because he, you know, surgeons in those days learnt their art by going to war. And they used to amputate legs, of course, without any anesthetic, although they gave some alcohol to, well, in the West, I suppose, the Christians, they gave alcohol. The Muslims couldn't have alcohol, but I think they probably chewed a bit of hashish or something like that. And apparently Nelson, when he had his arm sawn off, said, gosh, he said that saw was cold, tell the surgeon to warm it up next time. But apparently he just sort of gritted his teeth and allowed it to happen. But they used to put boiling tar on the legs of people who had amputated to stop the bleeding. And he ran out of boiling tar, so he used something much softer, sort of rose oil, and was very, very distressed because he thought he was doing them a lot of damage, and actually they did much better than those. So that was, in a sense, the first sort of trial of treating something different. He also used ligatures just to tie off the arteries, and so he, in many ways, is the father. And he had this, he was French. I saw his statue outside the Louvre quite by accident when we were there some years ago. But he said, I dressed him, but God healed him. It was his thing. So he was somebody who was humble enough to realize that it was God who was doing the healing.
And have you got a favourite Bible verse?
Yeah, one that's meant a lot to me over many years is Isaiah chapter 43. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overflow you. When you pass through the fire, you will not be burned. Something that's, you know, in some of the ups and downs of life has been very special to me. So that's probably my favourite.
Thank you.
I think it's time for Cromwell.
Time for Cromwell. He's been sat here very quietly, and the question he wants to ask are dogs or cats?
So I did wonder whether one of our two cats was going to make an appearance behind me. But no, but because we've got Jonathan's cats. But I have to say, if they're well trained, I prefer dogs.
Way, Cromwell! Ooh. Thank you. You made it.
Okay, well, David, thank you for your time. I think that's all we've got time for. And just for me to say, thanks for watching. You'll find this is the 5th week done, and you'll find the rest of them on the church website and on the YouTube channel. Thank you.